Welcome to the Configure Price Quote podcast. My name is Sven Krause and I'm the founder of CPQ Consulting. This podcast is 100% focused on Configure Price Quote, also known as CPQ, and will provide you useful insights into this topic. My guest today is Sven Krause. Sven has over 20 years of business experience and was until recently the CIO of Hillrom, a MedTech company with over 10,000 employees. And before that, he was for 18 years with Ernst & Young and Arthur Andersen. He is based in Chicago and has a ton of experience with large-scale IT projects, which includes CPQ projects. He is originally from Germany, and I'm very happy to have him on today so that he can share some of his experience as a CPQ customer as the CIO at Hillrom. Welcome, Sven, to the CPQ podcast.
Thanks for having me. Super excited to be talking to you today.
Very excited to have you, and very excited to have another German I can talk to on the podcast. But let's start by telling our listeners a little bit more about yourself and what you did before you left Hillrom, after it was acquired, I think, for around 15 billion.
About $11 billion. Yeah. The combined company of Baxter is about 15 billion revenues right now. And Frank, it's funny you say that two Germans together. I told my wife, who I met here in the United States, that you and I will be talking today about some engineering and sales topics, etc. And she said, I don't think I can imagine anything more boring than two Germans talking about engineering topics. So I promised her that it'll be interesting, and I'll give her the recording afterwards. But maybe for the audience, in order to stick to the podcast here, how about you and I will predict the price of Bitcoin at the end of 2023, at the end of this podcast. That's going to be our goal for today.
Okay.
Maybe some little bit of background. Yeah, so I moved to the US about 10 years ago. Started working for Arthur Andersen and Ernst & Young in Germany in 2000. Spent a lot of time in Germany with automotive companies, with automotive suppliers, a lot of manufacturers. And then the last 10 years in the US here was responsible mostly for life science companies, so medical technology, health technology, biotech, and pharmaceuticals as a consultant with Ernst & Young. And then, as you said, about 3 years ago, left consulting and joined as a CIO at Hillrom. One of the medical tech companies and customer of mine, became CIO there, and then did like a pretty large transformation with them over the last 3 years. And then we got recently acquired by Baxter, another company here based out of Chicago.
Hey, that's very exciting. Lots of experience. So what are you planning to do next? What are you doing right now?
You know, when you talk to friends, they always tell you, friends and colleagues, they always tell you, hey, here's everything that I'm planning on doing once I retire. And they have this like long laundry list of things. I used the deal with Baxter to take a few months off, and do some of the things that other people have on their retirement list. So, spend a good amount of time right now with my kids, with my wife, traveling and doing a lot of sports, building some new friendships. And it's been a really, really good summer. I can tell you that we got lucky with the weather in Chicago. So it's been a really good ride so far. And I started, now that the kids are back in school, I started, working with a few companies, from an advisory capacity, helping them thinking about how to scale and grow, with some of my consulting background, and then working with some of my former peers in the CIO space, helping them think through larger digital projects as well. So I do like to work. I talked about this a few times. So I can't stay away from that. But it's been a really good summer, and more to come.
And very excited to see what's coming next. But let me ask one question. How did you get started working with CPQ Solutions, and what CPQ Solutions have you worked with?
Yeah, absolutely. So in my consulting days, I was mostly focused on large digital transformations for typically Fortune 100 companies, right? So as I mentioned, I worked with a lot of the large automotive companies, a lot of suppliers, in general, manufacturers of various industries. And we always tried to look at the end-to-end processes that the companies are going through, not just at the back end side, the ERPs, but all the way to the middle office and front office. So naturally, when you interact with the different functions within the companies, from manufacturing, operations, sales, marketing, finance, etc., you are touching each of those components of the enterprise. And with that, I had the pleasure of working with some of the larger traditional players, the pros, the Aptuses, the Steelbricks of the world, and in some cases, we saw some specialized solutions being used by some of the more industrialized or verticalized players in the market. So that was really during my consulting days, and I worked with. I think you recently talked to one of my former colleagues, Chris Hergesell, who's a fantastic leader in that space. And him and I had the privilege of working together in my EY days and helping customers really think through what CPQ can do for you, what the right solutions are, how to drive value out of it, and how it fits into larger digital transformations.
Then let me ask one question. After you've worked with CPQ Solutions from the customer and consulting perspective now for many years, what's your key lesson learned at this point?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's probably going to be tough to put that down into one key lesson, but I can tell you, as I joined as a CIO and became a buyer of software, which I can tell you is a very different experience than being a seller or an SI or a system integrator or consultant of software. It was very helpful to understand and see the market, understand the capabilities and the differentiating abilities of the different vendors that are out there, and then bring that experience to the table as we were going through software selection, value case definition, and ultimately making a decision, to move forward with, a platform that was the best fit for us. Probably the number one learning is, and that's something I really personally like about CPQ, and you've touched on some of this in your podcast, Frank, is what I call this duality of speed. CPQ for me is like a platform, an approach, and a solution that allows you to move much faster and drive value much faster than with many other, I'd say, broader technology transformations. So in our case for Hillrom, we were looking at a broad digital transformation with a back-end ERP transformation in the center of it. And for anyone who is listening to this, who has ever gone through an ERP transformation, you know how tedious it is, how they are long, they are hard, they are resource intensive, they're costly. It's very difficult to keep people motivated over long periods of time. So with CPQ, one of the great learnings and takeaways for me is you can actually achieve value really fast and make it very tangible, for the right teams and business teams in the enterprise if you structure it right. So my takeaway from those experiences, and we applied that at Hillrom then, was really to look at it as an opportunity to move much more agile and much more in line with the business needs than a typical back-end transformation, like an ERP or business process transformation. I always compare it with you and I will understand that, but the German Autobahn, you have those folks that drive on the right side, and I compare that to the ERP train or the ERP cars. And then on the left, you have those that are accelerating past, and there's always somebody faster than you in the left lane. I miss driving on the German Autobahn, by the way. It's a tough thing for me to be in the US, not being able to go as fast as I can anymore. But that's really what CPQ was for me, is driving value quickly, and really helping the key folks in sales and sales operations and commercial to drive value.
Hey, I think now you've spoiled my next Autobahn experience, right? So I never thought about CPQ and driving on the Autobahn on the left-hand side. But yeah, it's definitely a fun experience. There's no question about that. Let me ask one thing also, and that is, so that was the good part, but CPQ is still challenging in a lot of cases, right? What do you think is the most challenging part of successfully installing a CPQ solution today?
The reality is that what happens in these projects when you implement a CPQ platform or solution is you uncover a lot of other things that you didn't necessarily anticipate, right? You're bringing a CPQ solution typically to address a very particular problem. Either it's we need a quoting solution, and it's and we need something that can help us maybe with some of our pricing issues, or very specifically, since we were focused massively on the manufacturing sector and I would say complex configuration sector. We have configuration issues or challenges to bring the complexities of our configurations to our customers and try to solve that problem. Once you tackle the problem itself, you start uncovering a lot of other, I would say, debt and technology and data debt that can lead to much bigger projects and potentially delays in implementations. And that's something I've seen while being on the consulting side and implementing some of the solutions, as well as now for us at Hillrom as well. Staying focused in a project around CPQ is extremely important, because it can easily bubble up and you lose control of scope and everything that happens around it, whether it's the underlying data around pricing, whether it's contracts, whether it's the master data around your products and configuration and bill of materials, whether it's the customer data. All of these were construction zones for us, to use that analogy, and so they are for every other customer that starts to tackle this. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge. Is it's such a powerful tool or platform to implement CPQ. The risk is that you lose control of the scope, because you try to tackle everything and then suddenly uncover, it would be great to combine it with our R&D team and really look at an engineer to order end to end, and also solve basically the engineering integration. And our manufacturing teams also need to be able to, have an integrated, integration into our CPQ here. So we make sure that all the configurations are valid, and they're not configuring something out there on the sales side that manufacturing cannot provide. Oh, by the way, we have, every customer is maintained 3 times in our CRM, and we have acquired 4 companies that have their own customer master. So you're getting from one challenge into the next, and you never actually finish the project. And I think that's one of the largest challenges that CPQ vendors will face with their customers.
Very valid points, very important points. So I hope potential customers, future CPQ customers, listen and keep that in mind. But now, before we talk more about CPQ, I want to ask you a more personal question, and that is, Sven, what do you do when you don't work?
Oh, that's a super easy one, Frank, for me, since I actually have experienced that now for the last few months over the summer. So as I mentioned, we love to travel. Like, my wife grew up as a child of a pilot, so she's been all over the world. We have young kids right now, 5 and 7, who started seeing the world with us. We travel back and forth to my family over in Europe and here in the US. So traveling has certainly been a priority for us. Other than that, I did pick up a new sport. I played soccer my whole life, and one of my really good friends recently sold his company and then got me into tennis. So I've now become like an adamant tennis player as much as possible. The summer was great here. So if anybody ever is interested in playing a match, I love playing against stronger players and learn. Been watching probably much more tennis than I ever should, much to the detriment of my wife and her complaints about this. But it's been very intense summer when it comes to playing tennis. And one of the things that I find very fascinating, paddle and pickleball have become like the number 1 sports in the US. So all my friends are trying to convince me now to play that. I'm afraid that if I start that, I don't ever go back to work. So I'm not gonna do that for now.
Novo CPQ Consulting helps you with all CPQ related questions. For example, we help customers to find the best CPQ solution for their business, and we help customers analyze their current business process to determine if and where CPQ can help. Here it's important to point out that we are 100% independent and always look out for our customers first. This means for us also that we don't get paid by any CPQ vendor for providing them new customers or for any other services. We are focused on our customers and always provide the best available information to them. We also help system integrators to improve their services, and we offer the only CPQ industry subscription that provides monthly CPQ news and trends. We have many other services, so check it out today at novocpq.com. Send me an email to frank.zone@novocpq.com to learn how we can help you with your CPQ questions, and keep us in mind when you look for 100% impartial CPQ advice. So then let's go ahead and let's talk a little bit about your experience at Hillrom, right? And what CPQ tools you used and what business outcomes you were looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe for those who don't know Hillrom, typically if you're not in the medical field or in the healthcare field, like Hillrom is not necessarily an extremely well-known brand, but maybe for background for our audience here, we are a $3 billion medical tech company based out of Chicago, operating in about 100 countries across the world, with about 15 manufacturing sites across the globe. You will see us when you ever go to your general practitioner and you go for like a regular vital signs exam or health exam. The brand that's called Welch Allen, you will see that at every practitioner office. So anything around your vital signs, and they look in your ears, your eyes, take your blood pressure, that's a Hillrom brand. When you are in a hospital, God forbid anything happens to you and you're in a hospital bed, that typically is Hillrom. You can see the brand on there. And then the third business unit that we had was our surgical business, which was really operating room equipment. So lights, booms, surgical tables, motion tables, etc. during a surgery. So when you listen to this, right, a lot of the demand, especially around our beds and our surfaces and our surgical equipment, are highly configurable products. So for us, the need for our sales teams to be able to simplify our quoting and selling was one of our priorities as we were trying to bring those three business units that have been acquired over the years together. When we started looking at this broader transformation and integration project of those three business units, certainly there was a big component around the underlying ERP and the underlying business processes, right? So we took an end-to-end business process perspective and said, this is really underlying process harmonization, data harmonization, reporting and BI harmonization, etc., was at the center of this. And then at the top, we've acquired, with those different companies, we've acquired obviously different CRMs at the front that, the sales teams had to deal with as they were interacting with our customers. Now you can imagine, put yourself in the shoes of a hospital. One day you get this sales team that is selling you the vital sign and monitoring devices. The next day you have a call with a separate sales team that is focusing on surfaces and beds for the ICU or for the regular departments. Or then the third day you have the orthopedics, for example, interacting with our surgical team, and it never seems like, hey, this is actually one Hillrom that you're interacting with. So we needed to look at not just horizontally across our business processes, but also vertically integrated way to interact with our customers. So we added CPQ into the scope of our digital transformation with a few goals. Number one, to really harmonize the face to our customers, right? So we acted as one Hillrom to all of our customers. And that was as basic as we were able to create quotes, for example, and have ability to calculate margins and pricing across our business units towards our customer. That was one. The other one was we were on a pretty significant growth path, and I wanted to, as a CIO, and my responsibility was really what I call digital density, right? So our ability to grow our top line in particular without having to add a significant amount of resources every single time. So we have this pretty large sales operations, commercial operations team that was supporting our sales team that we needed to help digitize in addition to the sales team itself. They were doing what you would call middle office work today. It's very common. I've seen it a lot of our customers. They were really doing the grinding between the back end and the front end. And there are solutions out there that solve for that, right? That really help that team to get to the data quicker, to drive the analytics better, and to provide the quotes and the prices and the configurations to our sales teams faster. That was the second big driver. And then the third one was really the integration into the back end side. So the ability for us to pull pricing, for example, pull the configurations, and align between sales operations, commercial operations, all the way back into the manufacturing. So those were like 3 top drivers for us to embark on CPQ. We looked at probably like 6 or 7 players out there, with different pros and cons. And obviously you're the expert in this as well, Frank, when it comes to how to select the right CPQ. We're a large manufacturer. We're engineering to order and make to order products, and processes behind it. So the priorities we had were really around taking the complexity of manufacturing and configuration out and simplify it for our sales teams to be able to sit in front of a customer, configure with the customer their needs for an operating room, for example, and then immediately be able to quote, route for workflow, approval when it came to different discounts, etc., and then hand them a quote and then be able to track the whole order all the way through delivery. That was a huge shift. It sounds very basic, but manufacturers are probably as much behind the curve as healthcare companies when it comes to digital transformation. So it was a huge shift for us. And that's where we really focused on the abilities that CPQ brought. Your second part of the question, which one did we pick? Yep. So we used to have, years ago, Aptus for our bed business in place. Good solution, good traditional CPQ. It didn't really fit with, I would say, the new norms anymore, right? It wasn't cloud-based. It wasn't scalable as we needed it. And the biggest challenge was really the maintenance between technology and the sales teams when it came to the rules engines themselves, when it came to pricing, customer data, etc. So I think they're part of Conga now, but it just wasn't the right fit for us anymore, as we were moving into a cloud-first strategy and needing something that is much more nimble and helps us to simplify the complexity that sits in our underlying processes. So we looked at Aptus Pro, Steelbrick, I think FPX, and a few other ones, and a company called IMC, InMind Cloud. One of our competitors actually in Asia used them, so I knew them, heard of them. We met with their leadership team. They became part of the software evaluation, and we ultimately went with InMind Cloud for 3 top reasons. Number one, their time to value on paper, and then in reality for us was the best, right? Within 5 months, we had the whole thing stood up, and we were able to drive value, had our sales teams operating on it, and we're selling it. The second one was the integration into both backend and front end, right? So we had backends, Dynamics, Oracle, and SAP. And then front end, we had Salesforce CRM. So the integration with that back and front end scenario was extremely helpful for us. And then lastly, as I mentioned, the ability for us to get to configurations quickly and create the right pricing quoting with the right integration was something that they had nailed, and the demos blew it out of the park. I can tell you that. So when we saw what they brought to the table in such a short time frame, it was a very easy decision for our teams to move with. And now we have the whole surgical business running on that platform, and producing quotes with significantly reduced cycle times, significantly increased basically quote and order volume, and a few other metrics that we've defined as important to us. So.
And how many people at Hillrom did actually use the CPQ tool?
So the old one, it was only a small group. It never really made it as far as to the broader sales teams, right? So when I mentioned Aptus before, when you look at the size of our organization, we had about 10,000 employees, probably about 1,200 of those in sales and sales operations or commercial operations. We have about 45 folks that did nothing but supporting basically the sales teams with pricing and configuration lookups, rule table lookups, etc. So they are all being trained as we speak on the new solution, and automating a lot of the work that they have had to do manually in the past. Within 6 months, maybe 7 months, we have now over 100 salespeople directly using the the direct configuration and selling and quoting actively. And the plan would have been for us to get all of our sales teams onto the platform. We were acquired by Baxter now, so obviously they have a much larger sales force across the globe. So I don't know what the final number will be, but the goal is really to drive this further into the organization. And the feedback has been extremely good and extremely strong, both from our sales teams as well as from our operations teams, but also from our customers, because the interactions have become a lot quicker and faster in response times, and the experience that they're going through with our sales teams has truly digitized and to some degree even personalized.
Excellent. I think the main point here was not the exact number of the users, right? Was more, it is a pretty sizable operation, right? So it's not the small team of 50 people.
You're right. Yeah, sure. Right.
Excellent. Now, one thing that now, right? So is the maintenance of the tool, right? So what would you suggest future customers or companies that look into CPQ solutions to consider about the maintenance of the solution?
That's a great one, and Frank, I'm glad you're picking up on this. Right, as I mentioned, like part of the reason why we resolved the last one was really the maintenance and the responsibility of who maintains what. When you look at the different components, customer master data, for example, or customer data, pricing data and pricing information, rules engine, those are all components that need to be maintained. And I think two things are extremely important early on. Number one is to define ownership of each of those domains. This is great. CPQ for me has been a great project for collaboration between an IT function, right, and me as a CIO and our business leadership. But you got to sit down in the beginning and define what the domains are and what the ownership looks like. And the second thing is like where those domains, where the single source of truth for those domains exists. Because in our case, we said, well, the ERP, and we were going through like an implementation here for the standard ERP. The ERP needs to be able to host the fundamental, pricing information. Well, we're working in a regulated environment, as a medical device manufacturer with, dealing obviously with reimbursement and rebates, etc. So we also had a pricing engine. In our case, Vistex now with Baxter Model N integrated that also needed to be able to provide, pricing updates. So it needs to be clear where is a domain being maintained as a single source of truth. Pricing for us was, for example, Vistex. The customer master was sitting in one application and being maintained there and then distributed into the other systems. The rules engine, had to be maintained. In our case, we moved it into the CPQ application with some underlying logic in the ERP, but that needs to be defined upfront and needs to be clarified. Otherwise, you get this battle between the different parties of where the single source of truth resides for each of the domains, and then you put a RACI next to it, right? And say, all right, pricing is being maintained, for example, in a small team of marketing and sales, in our case, with some finance support. Customer master is being maintained and owned by a team of marketing and sales, and they have for example, the R in responsibility and the decision-making rights. The rules engine is being maintained by ABC. The configuration sits with, manufacturing. And that definition up front and that picture, I would carry that picture throughout the whole project and remind people regularly that that's what their responsibilities are, because then they can build the resources that are required to do that. That's something that in my consulting days I've seen where they fail because the expectations are that, this is an IT project, let IT do this, or this is clearly a business project, so business has to, sales and commercial operations have to maintain. That's not reality. So align early on a starting position, and then leverage the project and the cycle of the project to establish the roles, responsibilities, and necessary hiring. And the last comment, Frank, I made don't underestimate the power of automation, right? Like a lot of the solutions nowadays have intelligence built in and automation built in, and there are providers out there, even non-CPQ, that provide a lot of automation around some of these standard business processes. Leverage that as well when it comes to maintenance, right? When you think about pricing intelligence, for example, there are players out there that can help you truly feed pricing and maintain pricing ongoing, and just let you basically manage exceptions rather than having to do manual daily reviews, for example. So for us, hyper automation was a top priority at Hillrom that we brought into every project and every initiative. And I would add the same for CPQ as well.
Very interesting, very exciting. And I had many more questions, Sven, but unfortunately we're coming to the end of this episode. So hence my very last question is, what's a good way for interested listeners to contact you in case they have any follow-up questions for you?
Absolutely. Sven Krause, LinkedIn is probably the best way. You'll still find me with Sven Krause and Hillrom on the LinkedIn. Just shoot me a message there. That's probably the easiest way. And I know, Frank, obviously, you have millions of people listening to you on the podcast, so they can always reach out to you, and then you can share my detailed contact details. So,
yeah, okay, I definitely will do that. We will have the information also in the show notes. Sven, thank you very much for sharing your experience over there and making time for the CPQ podcast today.
Chatting with you, Frank.
I'd like to thank everyone for listening and hope you learned something interesting today. If you like the podcast, please go ahead and rate it on iTunes or share it with your friends and colleagues. In the meantime, you can find us online at www.novocpq.com. So long, everyone.